Okay, call the meeting to order. So, first step, let's do the pledge. John will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Flag's right over here. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So since the last meeting, we had formed a subcommittee to look at, as we all know, we had money to bring in consultants. And the original subcommittee was the chair, Gio, Fred, Charlie, and Aaron. But then joining us that day were Senator Lang and Representative Ames as well. So we had a pretty good group there where we talked through the issues and decided, I think, on the basic framework of an RFP that will be going out. And then Charlie thankfully volunteered to put the meat around the bones, and then all the boilerplate that goes with a state RFP, which most of us don't know. So, Charlie, do you just want to just talk to it? And then since Charlie got this, now does everybody receive that in advance? You have it in front of you anyway, but since then, Aaron got back to us, I think Fred, and then the games got back to us with some thoughts on this as well. So, Charlie?
Sure, I'll jump in and start. Mr. Chair, the was a basic draft of what an RFP looks like for a gaming consultant. It was based on the conversations we had at the subcommittee at our offices. And it was forwarded to the subcommittee last Wednesday, I believe, for comments and input. And so I'll leave it there. And happy to take any input. Obviously, this is a document created for the membership, not just us. But it is a state RFP, so it does have to comport to state RFP requirements. But it does not, in terms of the guts of it, it's open for discussion and revisions. So,
Okay, I think Aaron, you were the first to weigh in. If you'd like to just make your comments about what you'd like to see.
Yeah, sure. My comments were to keep non-displaced in the region. It's not she's expanding and giving an opportunity compared to not only the region, but other jurisdictions.
Right, and I think the key thing there is other HHR jurisdictions. I mean, there are differences between slot machines and these historic racing machines, so I think we do want to compare apples to apples as best we can. So I don't have a problem with expanding it. I don't know about anybody else. Who else would like to weigh in on that, Dick?
Just to say that I concur. Thank you for picking that up.
Fred, you had some comments too that you had shared in via email.
Exactly. It'd just be repeating the same. We need to compare apples to apples.
Okay.
We can't compare the slot machines. I'm sure the operators would love slot machines, but we need to compare what we have.
If I recall,
So like,
the two that were specifically mentioned were Kentucky and Virginia.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, they're the two largest. I think most comparable in terms of number of properties and number of games and scale.
Dick?
It's just a question. You seem to be dull. What about West Virginia? What's West Virginia got?
West Virginia has full slot machines, and I don't know if they're technically slot machines or VLTs, but they're full gaming.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they operate like 24/7, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I think they might be a good somebody for us to look at.
Those are large. There's some very large scale casinos. I think thousands of games in some of the ones near DC.
Right.
So size may be different, but I think, sure. I mean, I think the more jurisdictions we compare it to, the better. That way it doesn't allow people to poke holes through it, right?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that last statement too. I mean, for a consultant, it shouldn't take them that long to figure out all these other states. They probably already know the data information about them. We should have as large a sample as we can get. Oh, yes, sure.
I mean, gaming across the country takes all kinds of forms, whether it be class 2 or, slot machines and HHR machines are both class 3. They just are. And so you shouldn't limit it to just HHR machines. You should see if we're worried about saturation, you should see what other jurisdictions have for saturation, as well as what the revenue is per jurisdiction, per device. It shouldn't be limited by state. It should be limited by revenues being drawn from the populace around it. So I would, in the interest of opening it up, I think I can redraft it so that it's comparable jurisdictions or comparable gaming jurisdictions, because there are 41 gaming jurisdictions, something like that. So they would have this data at hand, so I can open it up, literally just not limit it to 2 other states.
But do emphasize that, let's make sure we have enough historic racing in it. Yeah.
No question. Yeah. It'll be, there's historic horse racing in Arkansas, there's historic horse racing in Wyoming. I know I'm missing one.
Those are the big ones,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
certainly I think Virginia and Kentucky have a similar model with number
I
of
think, Senator D'Alessandro brings up a great point too, whether it's calculated into what comes back from these reports of the hours of operation. There's a difference there, definitive difference. And how do they calculate that into a 24-hour a day operation compared to the model we have? So there's a component there I'm sure that's going to have to play in.
Right. So in the RFP process, we're going to bring these, I'll call them vendors in before us to describe what they're going to do or what they're proposing to do. We may narrow that down a little bit beforehand, but we'll see who kind of meets the criteria.
If I could propose a schedule, because time is of the essence. RFPs take a while. We have to get GNC approval because it is a state contract. So I would propose that I'll take a redraft based on this conversation, send it out. Today's Monday. You should get it by Wednesday. And then if there's no objection, we'll go with it and we'll release it next Monday. And there's a schedule in the RFP draft itself in the document. So it's on page 2. It's released the 15th. We'll advertise it. We'll send it to at least the shops that I know. And Aaron, if you could send me a list of anybody you think I should in terms of companies. And I know Spectrum is an obvious one. And you mentioned Innovation. There's a couple others I know, but yeah. And so, Mr. Chairman, if you want to appoint an RFP committee versus the group as an RFP, sort of questions and answers and the like, or would you rather do it as the committee of the whole?
Oh, as we get questions from the vendors?
Yeah.
I don't think the whole, I think it should be limited, maybe you and I.
Okay.
And,
Happy to
well,
show.
I'll
'Cause
leave
we'll
that.
get a lot of technical, as if you've done RFPs before, I've done thousands, you'll get a lot of questions that are just pointless to send to all of you. Like, what font does the response have to be in? Garamond at Times New Roman, so I would suggest just a couple of people if it,
Well, send it,
yeah, I don't want to take it over. I have a day job, so.
right. Does anybody else who would like to be on that, what are you calling it, RFP committee? Dick and Aaron? All right, why don't we just go, and Fred, so that all of us, as the questions come in, we can coordinate via phone or whatever, the questions, how we want to answer those questions, and then we get back to these.
If I could offer, Kelly work with us as well.
Yes.
So that she can be the central repository for all the questions and answers and the like.
All right.
And so in the RFP itself, it'll list her as the individual to contact. Okay? Through me, through our office.
Okay, yeah, that'll be a good, funnel it through there. Yeah. Yes,
Before we leave this subject, I had sent out last night, sorry it was so late, also with the wrong email heading, but I managed to get it out. Some additional language for the RFP as a suggestion, and Charlie, I hope you got that. Maybe you didn't.
I'm
No.
just sorry, I ran around the meetings this morning.
All right. I got some, I made some copies. I don't know whether there's going to be enough here, but why don't we send out it?
Yeah, that's just fine.
The, what you see in huge black letters at the bottom and then over to the next is what I'm suggesting. This isn't a big deal, by the way. It's just, in section 2 of the RFP, there's a description of charitable gaming, and it's basically the games. And I thought, since we're asking the respondents to this RFP to give us a proposal related to charitable gaming, that we needed to flesh this out and reference the regulatory structure, the fact that these games can live and thrive, hopefully, in the same setting as other games, and that we do have some provisions related to responsible gaming, including a council, and just flag that so that the respondents will respond to the context that we live in. Get the idea?
Yeah, so
And Charlie, you can do a better job than I can, so feel free to play with it.
yeah, certainly, I'm fine with this, obviously.
Yes, and the other thing that Dick did send to us is, you sent it to everybody?
I forward that to all members of the commission. This is Ed Talbot, who's the co-director of the Council on Responsible Gaming. And he wrote a letter about self-exclusion and the process which he's and others have found frustrating, and wanted to flag that issue for the commission. It's a letter to the commission members. It's not a letter to me, but he's dealt with me before. So he found it easier to send it to me and asked me to forward it. So that's what you got there, just being forwarded by me. And it's a very interesting letter, by the way, about sort of the grassroots issues that arise around responsible gaming.
This is, again, an aside, this has nothing to do with the RFP, but without objection, I think we'll invite the council in at one of our meetings to discuss this.
Yeah, that would be great.
I've noticed, it maybe some of my colleagues have noticed that now responsible gaming and how you do it is now part of the message that's coming across with the ads. Don't bet too much, be careful, do this, do this, do this, do this, bang, 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 points that are noted by, let's call it, responsible individuals. I think it's important. It seems to me that's coming all of a sudden. There's a reason why that's coming, and I think with the tremendous expansion of activity and how you do it, there are problems that come along with that, and we all have to face that. That's all I.
Yeah.
I think that the industry understands that and is looking for a way to deal with it.
Right. And I think within our scope of what we're going to do, we're going to be addressing this.
Yes.
And I think this is, they volunteered their thoughts. I think we should invite them in to discuss it further. So that'll be great. What I neglected to do was to mention that Attorney General Formella hasn't been able to make our meetings, and he's agreed to have a substitute, which we do allow substitutes to come before us, and this is Mark Delofano. Did I get it right?
You got it right.
There you go, okay. And turns out he does a lot of work with the lottery So he knows the topic. So anyway, I'm sorry I didn't do that before we started.
Can you give your name again? I'm sorry.
Sure, it's Del Orfano, Dell apostrophe OR FANO. And I am an Assistant Attorney General at the Department of Justice.
Yeah, good Italo-American.
I was gonna say,
Well, you know, we gotta balance the sheet, that's it.
so, all right.
I wanted to keep the number the same, given the fact that the general couldn't attend.
Right. Good.
All right, so I think we're going to move forward as we discussed that Charlie take another crack at this with the input that we got from the members. It sounds like we're all agreeing with the changes that were being proposed. And then you'll send it out to the members, and then we'll do it's got to be a quick response. If you have any other comments, respond that day you get it, please. When do you think it's gonna go out on Wednesday or something like that? Because we want to get this RFP out and the wheels in motion on this one. So that we have enough time for them to do their work, the consultants to do their work, and then for us to digest, hear what they have to say, and formulate any recommendations that we need to down the road.
We also need to get GNC. Get on the calendar for the governor and council.
Right. Yeah, explain how that works again. I think it's gonna be you and I, right?
Likely, yeah, you and I. We'll go up and, it's submitted through Department of Admin Services. There's a calendar which you have to get be in front of a certain date to be on the regular calendar. I would suggest not being on the sort of emergency calendar. The council doesn't like that. They just don't. They like, they want to have a time to think about it, read it. They may have questions about it, so in the past, this RFP has been proposed to them, and we've had questions from the councilors, which I imagine we'll have as well. So
So this is the RFP itself?
Correct.
Or who we decide to select?
it's who we select, and the request to contract with that person has to be approved by the executive council.
Okay, so that would be the back end of the RFP process.
Correct. It would be the last step before they're engaged.
Right, right. They're
So
gonna
usually it's a very small subset of the group goes.
Right. Right.
It's usually sort of, in past, it's been the three people in this side of it's the AG's office, the head of the lottery, and chair of the committee.
Okay. All right.
But that's your call, to sort of, if you want to appoint folks to go, there's no magic to it. It's just, that's how it's worked, because I have to go because it's out of our budget,
Right.
so.
So if they decide to have a meeting in Colas County that day.
You're welcome to my world. If you have to go to Pittsburgh, you
So
know.
I know they make,
don't have-
I know they take the road on the show on the road. So,
Our meetings, that's why I want to get ahead of it. You don't miss our meeting.
oh, right. All right, so that's the RFP. I think we're all set there. Since our last meeting, the House Ways and Means Committee voted out an amendment to Senate Bill 112. And I thought it important that we understand what was in Senate Bill 112. And Fred Sett on our commission here was the prime sponsor of that amendment. So Fred, I asked Fred to just kind of walk through what that amendment was.
Sure, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just keeping to the two major points, because there is some housekeeping stuff relative to employee residency and other things. What it comes down to is the HHR machines and licensing them. The moratorium language that we've all talked about, we don't necessarily all agree on, but we can agree that the formation of this commission doesn't negate us going forward as far as pushing legislation. What I did with this was allow for the present operators who have applied for or who are in the process of securing HHR in their charitable gaming facilities, and also anyone else in the queue that may have an application in with lottery at present, up until October 18th of this past year. So that window is closed on the 18th from what Director McIntyre has told me there's 5 applications in the queue, so that would bring us up to about 19 operators with the ability for HHR. Also, another major component that we've discussed at this commission is the component of rent to the charities, and this basically, in a nutshell, eliminates the ability of any of these operators to collect rent from the charities. Hard stop.
Okay, so, let's go back to the first item. So what your bill does, it says, is this a temporary moratorium?
As it's written, no, it's a permanent moratorium. And we all know that one legislature does not bind the hands of another, but it's my belief and the people that I represent in Salem who believe that this needs to be hard stopped at this point because of saturation and what the possibility of the future in relation to this particular game may or may not be.
Well, it certainly is a topic that this commission is going to be addressing anyway. I mean, you've moved forward with a bill, still hasn't passed the House, so let's go to the Senate. So, but obviously this is one of the major things we have to talk about as commission as we move forward. And like you said, I mean, it's a bill, so the next legislature will always change it. So, Dick?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm also on Ways and Means, as are others here, and House Ways and Means, and supported this amendment and continue to support it. And one understanding that we all have, just mentioned by Representative Sett, is that that what is done today can be changed tomorrow by the legislature. And in this case, I think this is an issue that the commission will be looking at. Essentially, this provision keeps alive our options to look at whether there should be additional expansion or tightening. Well, probably not tightening up very much because it's hard to go back once you've opened the door. And this closes the door, but that door can be opened a crack or a little more. And so we can look at it in that regard. We're not facing a complete opening of the door such that when we get around to making our recommendations, the barn door has been opened and it'll be hard to close it. I didn't say that very clearly, but I do support this change that we're going to be voting on pretty soon, and see it as preserving the situation so that the commission can speak to it and do a deeper dive than we were able to do at Ways and Means.
Okay, thank you, Dick. Any other comments on that? Okay, back to the rent issue. I think we probably would have wound up there at this point, that we would get rid of the rents. Again, my only concern is for the smaller places. I'm just big picture now. There was a reason why there was rent. And this is before HHR times and all of that. And that was that, this has evolved from, I call mom and pop facilities that were, hey, charities, come help us, we're gonna create a place where we have table games. And you come in and your charity can sponsor nights. And by the way, it's a risk to us and to hedge against the risk. Some of the legislators at the time must said, okay, we'll allow rent to protect the bad days. In other words, it could be that we're having a couple of days, there was snow days, whatever, they still staffed the tables and they didn't make any money on it. So they decided that, okay, they could charge rent. I think we're beyond that when you look at the numbers. The revenues are really getting bigger and bigger, but there's still a few small ones. When I look at Northwoods Casino, who's that? Who's Northwoods? Berlin, right. So they, from the data that Charlie provided us, the charity allocation was $106,000 for 1 year. And I did the math backwards, so that meant that was the 35% allocation. So the other 65% was about 197,000. So combined, that's around, I don't know, it's about 300, around three. Let's call it 300,000 in revenue. It seems like I've talked to some people about this. It seems like the association of these locations, these organizations, has support of all of the facilities. What I'm getting at is that I think we're in a position right now to take a position on this. Do we want to hear from some of the smaller locations before we weigh in on the rent issue? Because my goal is to try to take one of these issues at a time and take it off the table and say, look, let's vote on it and move on to something else to talk about. So I think we're pretty close to saying, yeah, I mean, Fred, your bill trying to jump the gun a little bit, that's fine. But as commission, I think the time of rents is long gone. It sounds like the association is agreeing with that. Let's say a head shake here. Yeah,
So again, I think that, apologize for my voice, but I think that, again, the operators have come to an agreement that this is an okay provision. They're okay with removing rent as an organization. So, we can take our position on what we want, but just understand the people who are going to be getting the money are saying, no, we're okay with not getting the money. So.
right. So, yeah,
If I could just say one thing on that. So I think the association, if I'm not mistaken, is good with it, but tied to the moratorium. If the moratorium doesn't happen, then it could be a financial burden on some of the smaller properties.
okay, so that's an interesting piece of information because, I mean, I can understand that. And without the moratorium, I mean, this is a big issue for us to discuss as we move forward. I mean, how many of these facilities do we really want in the state? I mean, if we weren't talking charitable gaming, we were talking real casinos, we wouldn't be talking about 19 casinos. And then the other issue is not just casinos, but how many historic racing machines, do we think is reasonable? Now, we know in the legislature, we know that there's free market. Let the market dictate that. Let the market dictate how many machines, let the market dictate how many locations. But we know the more there are, and it's going to be survival of the fittest out there. But when we look at other states, they all restrict the number of locations. No? Okay, Charlie, help me out.
Nevada doesn't.
Huh?
Nevada doesn't. Nevada, you can get a license in Nevada.
Oh, Nevada, okay, so there's one, well, Nevada is Nevada.
And also the number of states, it's limited tribally as well. Like Connecticut, it's limited.
Well, we're tribal, we don't have that issue.
No.
So, but those are issues we got to address. So, Dickie, I know you had your action.
I think two things have become, having been around this business for a few years, I would say to you that proliferation has always been a concern. We were opposed more than one for 20 years. So now we're talking about 19. How much will this community called New Hampshire bear in terms of the number of entities that are in place? I think it's imperative that we put a number in place. We're talking about pot, and we're talking about the number of dispensaries that we can have. So we're we're in the habit of creating a situation where there's a certain number that are required. I think it's an imperative. And with regard to the rent, Bob Odell put all of this together in the Senate a number of years ago. That's where the 35% came from, and that's where all of the amenities that were put in place were developed. We did that in Senate Ways and Means, and I think the House accepted that. I don't think that there was any appreciation for the expansion that has taken place over the last few years. And certainly with the advent of historic horse racing machines, you got another entity that's in the mix now that plays a significant role. And whether you equate it with a slot machine or not, it is what it is. And I think proliferation for certainly the vendors. I mean, those who are operating are going to have a distinct opinion on this. You got to limit this thing to a certain number of crises. Otherwise, it just gets out of hand. I mean, how many, Charlie, do we really have in operation as we speak?
It's 10 now. And I think I sent out to the subcommittee, there are 1,900 machines in activity currently. That number is proposed to grow. And I would submit, do 10 hot dog stands at 10 restaurants? I don't know. The machines are what concern me in terms of the number and the proliferation,
Right.
more than the number of facilities does. That to me is a bigger concern than the number of facilities. Like, to me, there should almost be a quota system for machines. But then again, you're getting protectionist, or do we set a limit on locations and times? And it seems to be on one hand, we're being protectionist, on the other hand, we're saying let the free market decide.
Well, I think if I might, Mr. Chairman, look at what we've done with the time. The time element that's now available. You can open at 8 o'clock in the morning, and you can go into what, 2 or 3 in 4 o'clock. So if you go from 8 to 4, that's an enormous movement in one direction that was never envisioned in the early stages of this activity. So I agree with you. When you talk about machines and the number of machines, that becomes another, I think, a very interesting situation here.
And if I could, Mr. Chairman, the vast bulk of the machines that are proposed will be on the southern border. And so Representative Doucette's point about Salem, they're going to bear the brunt of the activity versus, like, for example, North Country. Yeah, just because of the population density. Population density is a given in gambling. It's a
Yes.
variable that matters tremendously for the math and for the revenues.
Yes.
So again, I think we recognize this when we put rules in place. The idea was using the revenue multiplier as a way of controlling the difference between a game of chance and historical horse racing and how much that balance could look like. And maybe that's the appropriate place we look, maybe not the number of locations, but how that balance plays out, right? Again, the idea was we wanted to encourage more games of chance, but allow for HHR. And so a multiplier was put in to keep a ratio between those two things. So that was the way I think we looked at it when we passed this, was a way of managing and controlling this, was using that ratio of gaming, table games, and gave you a chance to machine betting.
Okay, again, we're not going to solve this today, but this is going to be the crux of, again, the information we get from the consultants will be helpful too on this issue. Charlie, did send out.
Yeah, that was it's just a sort of a breakdown, oops, sorry. It's a breakdown of the number of machines per capita and where we lie on that spectrum. We are less saturated than Rhode Island. We are more saturated than Maine in terms of machines per person.
Already, you say we have 1,923 machines?
Yes.
That's current.
That'll fluctuate given the day. That's just a snapshot when we got it that day, I think from 2 days before. So it'll be around there, but it'll be growing over time. I don't imagine that number to get lower.
So without the growth that we're anticipating in the state,
Yes.
we're at 725 machines per capita,
Other way around, people per machine.
people per machine.
Correct.
And Massachusetts is 1,353
Yes.
people per machine.
Yeah. And the average in New England of those states was, I believe, 788. So we're slightly more saturated than average. So
Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
I'm curious as to why Connecticut wasn't included. Just curiosity.
the tribal casinos, and their relationship was not statutory based. It's limited wholly by, I don't know what the machines are currently, but there was a time Foxwoods and Mohegan Sun were the two biggest casinos in the world. So they would probably have upwards of 10,000, I believe. And so they would be 10,000 divided by 3 million. You're talking 300 per person, or 300 people per machine.
No, just curiosity.
Yeah, those are other, their growth and derivation was litigation. The number of lawsuits, the tribes sued the state of Connecticut, so.
okay, so, I think the discussion on on rent, I think we are in agreement, but I'm gonna hold off to maybe the meeting or two from now, we'll actually vote on that as to, that we think rent should, be eliminated, although there was a little caveat here, that it would be tied, the folks from especially the smaller locations wanted to make sure there was a cap on it, so maybe we'll hold off a little longer than that too.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to mention, given that tie is effectively in SB 112, because while we're putting a moratorium in, and removing rent, it's not like if that passes, you can suddenly, you know what I mean? It's already tied. It's already, so if.
That's why I was thinking about it, I'm saying, we'll hold off on that, because it's part of the larger discussion at the end.
Right.
Okay, thank you. All right, so anything else on those? Okay, so, last meeting, Charlie handed out this document. And we never really went through it, which is kind of like, it covers Maine, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire, compares them, what those states have, what the taxes are in those states. But I don't know, do folks bring those with them? Oh, good. Yep, with the dice.
I have, I was looking one for more.
So I just thought we could go through this real quick, Charlie. First off, what's a racino?
It's a term of art in the industry where, based on having been a horse track mostly before, sometimes dog tracks, the owner operator is able to get machines, and it's often used to support the indigenous racing industry. For example, like a Kentucky or West Virginia. It was actually used. West Virginia casinos, part of their requirement is that they fund dog racing in West Virginia. In fact, West Virginia is the only state in the U.S. that still has live dog racing. And it was used to fund, and part of the requirement to get the license to open a casino is you spend 7 figures supporting dog racing in the state. That's sort of what a racino is.
So that was Hollywood Casino in
Correct.
Maine.
And similar to Oxford Casino, it had been a racetrack owned by Mr. Bear,
Right,
and which he sold to Churchill Downs. Churchill Downs now owns that facility.
right. Okay. So we have if you go to main key facts, it seems like every state taxes differently.
Every state.
And then Massachusetts, of course, they figured out how to tax every little thing, and everybody has their fingers in who's gonna get the money. But in Maine, just define the difference between the gross slot revenue and the net. I think I know what it is, but can you just state what that is?
Well, I actually don't know it, but I'm sorry, this was prepared for by one of the folks I work with.
Okay.
In terms, so I actually don't know how Maine defines it, because that would matter. I'd have to check with them.
And he's not here right now.
He's not here right now, no. I know net slot income is what's left at the, in the machine at the end of the day, in terms of what gets divvied up, and how that gets divvied up. Maine, as I recall, has about 7 tributaries off of their revenue as to where the money goes, and I'd have to bring them for you, to get them for you. I literally just did this as sort of something as a reference point. I wasn't happy to have gone through it a little more detail, but not prepared to do it today.
Right. Okay. And then you give a table of what the total taxes are. But then on top of the taxes, and this is something that we don't have in New Hampshire, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, we have license fees for certain things, but I'm sure they're just reasonable license fees.
Yeah, there's no commas.
Hmm?
There are no commas in license fees.
No, no. But in Maine, you want a casino operator's license, that's 225,000. What's a slot machine distributor license? If you, distributor of slot machines?
Correct. So it would be Ainsworth, Konami,
So if they
Light
want,
Wonder, all the.
so if they want to do business in Maine, that's $200,000.
Correct.
And, well, these are annual? Or this, I guess the casino operator license, there's an initial and then future years, right?
Yeah, so if you look down the table.
Yeah, renewals, yeah, 75,000, yeah. We don't have any of that,
Correct.
okay.
But like I said, there are fees. I think the license fee, Valerie, if I'm wrong, for operator is $750? Yeah, $750 for an operator.
Okay. All right. Then the table game fees, 100,000, you know. Okay, so that's just one example. Maine, Massachusetts, which invents every tax in the world. They have 3 casinos. We all know about Encore and then the Springfield location. And then they basically have a slot parlor, I would call it. Plain Ridge, there's still just slot machines there.
Yes.
So let's go to the numbers. So just for comparison, I mean, Encore, I guess Encore in the Springfield, their initial fee was 85 million.
Yeah.
Yep. But, and they also had a guarantee that their minimum investment, that they're gonna build a nice facility, was $500 million hotel with hotel. So there were certain restrictions in it. And then a tax of 25% on net slot machine and table game revenues.
Yeah.
In Massachusetts.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, there's also a requirement that the jurisdictions get something too, from each of those as well. But there's a takeout for them as well. It's a couple of percent per, I think it's 3 for the host and 1% for the surrounding. So that they can deal with the social issues and pay for enhanced security and the like.
In the category 2 license, looks like it's just a slot, is it Plainfield?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So Plainfield, just for slot machines, was $25 million upfront, and minimum investment, 125 million. Actually, it was there once. I saw Garfield of Simon and Garfunkel, Simon and Garfunkel fame. So I didn't play the machines, but I went to the event there. And then there's 49% net on the net slot machine income. So,
Pat, can I ask a question?
yeah, sure.
And it's going to be for Aaron, because it's a gaming operator question. So interestingly, I'm looking at Massachusetts facts, and I look at Encore, and I look at MGM Springfield, right? Two significant casinos. One seems to almost have an equal distribution between slot revenue, and I'm going to, for our purposes, consider that HHR revenue, and table game revenue, right? They're pretty evenly divided, and then you go to MGM and it's nowhere near. The table games are 1/4. Is that having to do with marketing the operator, what they're looking for in a player, and what they're emphasizing in their facility? Or is that just happen to be a weird coincidence?
I can't answer that off the top of my head, but a lot of it has to do with the demographics, and table games players usually eat at more high-end restaurants, slot machine players, buffets. The Asian demographic, which Boston, I'm assuming, has a lot more, tends to lean towards table games versus, I know it's a lot smaller in Springfield, so I think it's a bunch of factors all built in.
Thank you.
Okay. And then there's a whole slew of Massachusetts, there's a whole slew of other fees. And monies that have to go to places here. I'm not quite sure. And I know you didn't pull this together, Charlie, but regulatory costs, is that above the percentage from the games in the slot machines?
No, I think that's the budget of the gaming commission. I do know that there's an additional tax on machines in Massachusetts, which is $600 per machine per year. I think that's what it goes towards, if I recall correctly.
Okay.
So if you look down, there's a per EG, under the Mass law, it's defined as an electronic gaming device, if I recall correctly. Every law considers the machine, or not every law. There are variances amongst laws as to what it's called. Sometimes it's called a video lottery terminal. Sometimes it's called the, EGTR, so it's called HHR. It varies by the definition of the statute.
Okay. But again, there's a variety of fees here, above and beyond the normal tax, I guess is what it's.
Yeah. Correct.
And then we have Rhode Island. There's Bailey Twin River and Bailey Tiverton. So again, Charlie, what's it, they have something called video lottery terminals.
Correct. Rhode Island is a story unto itself. That would take me a long time to explain. IGT, which is the biggest, I think still either the first or second biggest slot manufacturer in the world, is also the biggest lottery vendor in the world, is the biggest employer in Rhode Island. And so they're very influential in the State House of Rhode Island. They've had the Rhode Island contract for lottery and for the systems at the casinos forever. And they just renewed for 20 years based on the terms you have here. And so it's just been a state that's embraced gambling for a long time.
Okay. I say the extension to 2043, yeah.
Correct. They had previously had a 20-year extension from 2003 to 2023.
And they have, again, just like Mass did too, they want to make sure that there's investment into these facilities to make them probably multi-faceted facilities, I would imagine.
Yeah, Twin Rivers had actually prior to it been a racetrack as well. And so it had the remnants of the racetrack, just didn't look particularly nice. And they wanted to upgrade those.
Okay. All right. So again, there's a lot of apples and oranges between the states. And that we've got to, and then there's a whole section here on New Hampshire. Basically, we're looking at 14 right now, 10 have historic racing machines. And Sportsbook is at Seabrook, Manchester, Dover, and Nashua.
Correct.
And then simulcast is at Brook. We know about the 10%, 35%, and all of that. But then there's a nice table at the end here, but with the, as of calendar year 22, for the there were, at the time, there were 16 locations, I guess. Now we're down to 14. Is that correct?
Yeah, sorry, the two Keene locations merged.
Okay,
It was it was last year, right? Yeah, that's right.
yeah. And you can see in the chart, I mean, it's, in total gross revenues, all for 1 year was 73, call it $74 million, of which the commission share, does that mean, is that the state? Who's the commission?
Yeah, that's us, yeah,
Yeah.
the state.
8.6 million. And then the charities benefited 20.5 million. And the GOEs, which are the owners of these facilities, again, this is their, not their net revenue, this is their gross revenue before expenses, 44.6 million. So, I mean, there's a good little chart to get a sense of the wide range of size of the facilities. If you look at them, they're smaller ones.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, certainly, I'm happy to update these numbers the next meeting, because we will have calendar year, presuming we're not having a meeting before Christmas, for calendar year 23 as well.
Okay, yep, that'd be great. Okay. And the last two pages of this document shows you how these states, I mean, they micro this. I mean, you know, we tend to send money to the general fund or send it to the education trust fund or whatever. Here, the earmark, there's a lot of earmarking going on with where the money goes. I mean, they earmarked, the city of Bangor gets 1%. They get, you know, we may get to that, by the way, as we discuss this, that, because there was some discussion that some of these, as these facilities get larger, that some of these communities are saying, hey, you know, it's costing us money to provide police coverage in the evenings and nighttime. I mean, they got things like 0.5% goes to the Maine milk pool. 0.15% goes to Maine Maritime Academy. You know, they really earmark things. And then Massachusetts is, actually, the Maine was even more so than Massachusetts earmarks. I mean, yeah, there's 40% goes to their education trust fund. There's 2.5% goes to the racehorse development fund. I don't know, do they still have live racing? Didn't they close the one?
Yeah, there was, they're closed. There's no live racing.
Right. So, again, as far as I know, all the excess state money goes to the education trust fund. Dick?
Yeah, I think the picture's a little bit different because in New Hampshire, what we're doing is we're allocating the revenues that aren't going to be kept by the operators to the general fund, but also to charities. And so there's a big chunk of money that's going to charities, and no other state is doing that. But they're doing a lot of other things, and that's the long list we're seeing under Massachusetts and so forth. Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to say is this is exactly the information that I hope the consultant that gets the job helps us sort through and separate and be able to compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges, because it's hard right now. And so New Hampshire doesn't have a big licensing fee and access to the entitlement to operate these facilities, but we've got other things, and other states are getting a lot of money. So people say to me, well, why aren't we getting $25 million for, for the next historic horse racing machine operator that's going to have 1,000 machines, let's say, and so forth. We've got to be able to sort through this and that and be able to explain it.
I think that there is one other state. When Delaware began this process, and Delaware was they were the initial entry, and they had 3 tracks. They had Delaware Park, they had Dover Downs, and Harrington. They're still running. Those 3 tracks are still running. 2 years ago or 3 years ago, pressure was put on Delaware to put charitable gaming into all of these facilities. So they now have charitable gaming. They still have, I think they still maintain the initial situation that existed, the big ticket items cost. But there is a charitable gaming component. I don't know how that's handled, but the woman who runs the Delaware Lottery is a former representative, and Helene, I don't know what Helene's last name is, but anyway, she runs it, and I'm in contact with, but I know that they have charitable gaming. So at least there's somebody who we can look at who deals with charitable gaming in the true sense of the word charitable gaming. I don't know how many other states have it as we do, but in Delaware, it sits upon an organization that began with the lottery becoming the place where gaming was expanded. Machines at the track, dollars allocated for horse racing. At Dover Downs, there's a car track that's there, so they take care of that. But they still maintain standardbred racing there. In Harrington is a fair type of situation, which would be more like an agrarian situation. All right, that's the southern part of the town. But there's a good example for us to look at of an existing situation that then placed charitable gaming on top of it, and what's happened as a result of that, what the charities get versus what's the general situation with regarding the lottery and how much dough the lottery takes out of this, and where the money goes there. Because when you look at what's in place at our sister states, you look at the initial cost to get into the business, and getting into the business is quite expensive. It's a multi-million-dollar situation. And for us to get in the business, it's what, $575 or something like that?
750.
So $750 compared to $35 million. There's a huge differential there. And that certainly shows up on the numbers that are here. But on the other side, the charities, if you look at what the charities get here versus there aren't any charities in many of the other jurisdictions other than the one that I've articulated on Delaware. So when you give it 20 million to charities, based on the numbers that we've seen here, $20 million is a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And we're going to have to look at that, because anything that disturbs that would be problematic, I think, quite problematic.
Yes, Tim.
So I'm assuming we're just talking now about general revenue and revenue sharing and how that revenue sharing is occurring. And as I said, in the RFP process, the state takes a unique process, and we take that 35% and give it to charities. We just choose not to do the individual allocations. We're letting the operators pick the charities and do those charities. But make no mistake, that's still a state required expense or draw out of funds that are happening for an operator. So when we're talking about percentages and what percentages look like, the effective rate, if you combine HHR and games of chance, the effective tax rate is 35%. right? That's our effective tax rate that we're requiring out of the revenues that operators make. And understand that out of the remaining 66% the operators keep, they still have to pay business profits tax. They still got to pay business enterprise tax. So I'm not even sure the 35% is an effective rate when you add in all those other taxes they have to pay, that they give to the state, local property taxes that go into that as well, that come out of their 66%. So I'm hoping as we talk about this and what that really looks like, I don't want to walk out of here thinking that the operators are stealing, right? That they're just making money hand over fist, because there are a lot more requirements and a lot more expenses that are on the other side. And I'm not justifying anything other than just to make that statement to make sure we're clear when we talk about our numbers, right? They have just on their base gross revenue, absent all those other expenses, they have a 35% tax rate on their revenues. And then on top of that, they have all those local things and all the other state taxes they've got to pay. And so their effective tax rate is probably much higher than it would be for other businesses in the same, just a regular business. So I just want to make sure we're taking into account that whole big picture of what that looks like. I look at the 35% they do for charitable gaming on the games of chance side is basically the state saying, we're not going to micromanage this, we're going to let you deal with it, right? We're going to just let you do the grants locally and not have to have that at the state, because I can't imagine the finance committee having to figure that out. And distributing those funds. So as we're looking at this, I just want to make sure we're taking a holistic look at everything and the revenues and the fees being charged to operators that are beyond just a simple what's the split look like.
Right, and understand that,
I was just gonna say, it's actually 35 plus 10 to the state, so 45 total, right?
right. So understand our goal is to, look, we're not taking anybody's side on this. We're saying what's fair to the state, what's fair to the organizations that have facilities that have offered these games, and what's fair to the charities. And that's what we're trying to get at. We're not saying that it's not fair now, but we don't know. So that's why we're going to bring these consultants in to help us at least compare as best we can, apples to apples, to make sure that we're being fair. Look, we're not going to dismantle charitable gaming in the state. No way. I mean, charitable gaming is here to stay, and I know it hears me say this all the time, but it's here to stay. But it's changed so much that it's good that we have this commission, because we need to pause and look at kind of what's going on in the industry here. We really don't have any. There's only one local owner at this point of all of them, which is fine. They're outside owners. But that's all happened in the last 5 years, where it's all changed on us. I mean, and the whole issue of how many and all of that, we can all be free market types and say, let the market dictate it. And, but, I don't think all existing locations are really going to be excited about that. Or we could say, look, let's limit it. Clearly, everybody's going to want to be in the southern tier, because that's what the population is. But maybe we want to help more charities up in the North Country, and the way we can do that is by having more facilities up north. So maybe we need to weigh in on some of those issues as we talk. Maybe geographic allocation of some of these up north. Do you want to weigh in on that?
Yes, I want to, one of the geniuses, if you want, here that out of the charitable gaming is really distribution. Because if you look at the various other states, it goes to government. Government is taking this, and government says, these are the good programs. With our charitable gaming, the various organizations, if you want, are going over sponsoring 10 days a year. But it's going to that little organization, if you want, unknown one that cares for maybe Sisters of the Blind, if you want, They've got 15 volunteers who are putting in countless hours, if you want, in there. But boy, part of those hours are going to have been trying to fundraise. All of a sudden, that $5,000 possibly comes in because they're a sponsor. Go over, revitalize the organization, and I can go over and provide more service. And it's those unknown ones that those particular small organizations can go to can knock at Delaware North's if you want door. It says, hi, this is our Delaware North looks at it and says, not worth it. Okay, we'd rather give our money to the cancer fund, to the big names. Again, you get the recognition. So it's those small ones that really end up by multiplying, if you want, those dollars, because even the local communities don't have budgets to go over and necessarily fund that particular organization's services, so that those kind of fall by the wayside because they're small.
Right.
And our charitable gaming goes over and is able to go over and address some of those. And I would certainly agree that the North Country, again, has got to be looked at. But the North Country organizations can apply if you want and sponsor. If you want the 10 days in Nashua, in Salem, Manchester, if you want, they're not, the sponsors are not limited as to where they are in the state. They just have to be a charitable organization.
Right. Well, thank you for that.
Yep.
I'd like to spend the rest of the day talking about the charities, because that's basically why we're here. I have a handout. And then I also we have an invited guest here today, Kathleen Reardon, who I'll introduce in a minute. I just want to start the discussion about charities. And I'm not saying, again, to me, this is all a blank sheet of paper. We don't necessarily we're helping a lot of charities now, there's no question about it. Charities are making over $100,000 today. It's kind of hard to say to them, well, we're going to pull the rug out from you going forward. But I had a few thoughts about, just to get the conversation going, and then we'll hear from Ms. Reardon about our charities. And it's, the question of who selects the charities, who schedules the charities, maximum number of days per charity. We know it's 10 in statute, but doesn't mean every charity gets 10 days currently. It's up to the facility. Some facilities they give 7 days. Or they may say, we only give you 5. Or we have 3 extra days. Who wants the 3 extra days? The obligation of the charity, we could say, well, it's just random, we're picking charities, but if I was a facility, why wouldn't I select a charity to be in my portfolio of charities? Because they actually work it. They bring people in because they do a good job of promoting the event, the 10 days that they have. And then it was brought up about the daily posting of charities at the facilities. I think, who was it? Representative Baruti, did you bring that one up last time? About some of the charities not properly posting the event at the, was that you?
The license is there, or it's
Right. 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 So then, thank you. The categories of charities. I mean, there's different missions, different sizes, different needs that I can see. Charlie provided a great list of all the charities that are being helped right now, that are participating, and it's a wide, broad list of charities all over the place. Can we categorize those charities into different groups? I was told by potential new charities that want to be involved, when I said, well, you can make 100, if you pick the right facility and they accept you, and you get 10 days, you can make $100,000. They go, what? We don't need that much money. Is there, again, this is all thinking out loud here. In terms of, do we even want to touch the way things are done with the charities or not? But again, it's, a charity's not a charity, it's not a charity either. But and then how do we accommodate more charities? This is the problem we got, is that as more and more charities find out about this, more and more charities want to be involved. Now, at least we did with historic racing machines is we doubled the number of charities. Two charities sponsoring one date. And by the way, a facility can't open unless they have the sponsors there, which is different than any other state, any other location, that you can't open for business if you don't have a sponsor by a charity. So it's really, in a way, the charities are kind of weighing the dog a little bit. I mean, it's just the way it's been structured. I mean, that's the way it is. No charities, no, you can't open. And then any ceiling on annual winnings. My concern is if some of the facilities grow, everybody's going to want that facility to have dates. If it's only 2 dates, my gosh, should there be some kind of a ceiling? And again, we're not going to hurt. Again, I would not do anything here that was going to hurt any existing charities that have done a good job all these years. I don't think we have to. We have to make sure that, and that's what we did by historic racing. In the way we phased in historic racing, we made sure we protected the legacy charities that were already involved. But there's going to come a point where there's 100,000 or is it 125,000? Should there be a ceiling? I'm posing this as a question. I don't know, but there's going to come a time that is it better to say that we limit the days from 10? Is that a way you control this to make sure? But let's pick up. Look, as some of these charities grow and they add more machines, because we have no restrictions on how many they can add. If they decide to add another wing, and we still have only 2 dates, I mean, so now the existing charities can make 150,000, 160,000. Or is it better to say, well, let's share the wealth and open it up to more charities? Again, a way you can do that is by reducing the days statutorily from 10 to 8 or something like that. So this is all open questions for me that we have to deal with as a group here. So I just wanted to start that thought process going here by having my short list here of things. Not that we're going to accomplish that today, but what I'd like to do is to ask Kathleen Reardon, who's the chair or the president, the chair of the New Hampshire Center for Nonprofits.
Pat,
Thank you.
could
Yes.
I say one thing? So 2 things on that is that I also want to remind everybody that the statute doesn't require 10 days. The statute is up to 10 days.
Yeah, no,
So
it's up to
any
10 days.
evening operator could split their week up if they chose to and have smaller charities up 2 days a week and have 5 charities in a 10-day period rather than 1. So by statute, they already have the flexibility operators do to be able to work with smaller charities if they want to and break up the revenue stream in a different manner. And then on top of that, again, we do have restrictions on the number of machines they can have, and we do that by the revenue ratios. So we do have a metric that we could control the number of machines. That metric is through the revenue ratios
Yeah,
and adjusting.
but
the
I can
revenue
expand,
ratios.
I can add a wing and add more table games too, right?
Sure, but you also have to make the revenue on those table games. So you can't, if you put the wing in, and you don't make any money, you can't increase your HHR machines.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to mention as a charity representative as well, that the charities, when we doubled up, started making, at least where we benefit, made less the following year once they doubled up. Because even though we're tier 1, it still didn't make up for it in revenue from the expansion, let's say, of the machines.
Right.
So the doubling up, that comes into account. And where I work as well, there's about 10 charities that I had that ended up benefiting somewhere else. Because of the doubling up of the charities, if any charity is not benefiting, I would urge them to reach out to any room, because they're all looking and they're actually scooping up from each other to get charities on the list in order to be compliant and be able to open, as you said.
Say that, Charlie.
No, so to that point, you're gonna get a saturation point of charities that want to engage. Like, we're almost to the point of, if we were to double the number of rooms, we couldn't meet the number of charities, like, level.
Okay, well, this is an interesting, sorry. Fine. Actually, there are charities that don't want to raise money through gaming. I mean, it's just a reality. So, okay. Well, with that, Ms. Reardon, thank you for being here. I'd like to hear from what you have to say and what your organization, some ideas that you may have.
Great. Well, thank you, Chairman Abrami and members of the committee, and giving me this opportunity to present here. My goal today is to let you know a little bit about the center and also about charities, and not necessarily getting into the details of what you've talked about today. So as for the record, my name is Kathleen Reardon. I'm the CEO of the New Hampshire Center for Nonprofits. With more than 700 nonprofit members, the center exists to strengthen and give voice to our nonprofit sector. We provide a broad array of programming, educational tools, and resources so that nonprofit boards and staff leaders can manage and govern their organizations effectively. The center is widely recognized as the go-to resource for nonprofit leaders, and we provide a wide array of programs and services. Over the last couple of years, we've provided 45 to 50 educational programs each year that reach 2,500 participants on a wide array of topics, including financial management, fundraising, marketing, and more. Our signature Hoffman Haas Fellowship helps prepare rising board leaders for nonprofit board service, and we've helped about 213 people have graduated from that program. We host monthly peer circle programs for executive directors to learn from each other, get guidance, share expertise and best practices. And our annual Nonprofit Leadership Summit and Policy Caucuses brings together nonprofit leaders, business leaders, community leaders to look at policy issues, current trends, and other issues impacting the nonprofit sector. New Hampshire Gives is the state's largest day of giving. The center coordinates that, and since inception, more than $12 million has been raised for 1,000 nonprofits participating in that 24-hour online giving event. More than 6,700 people receive our newsletters, which are full of information and tools and resources for their organizations, as well as job postings in the nonprofit sector. And even more, go to our website where we have a lot of resources, templates, and tools. We work to elevate the visibility of the nonprofit sector and its impact on our state, and we advocate for policies that help nonprofits advance their missions and serve our communities. Many of you have talked today about charities, and I just want to reiterate how important they are in our state. Our state is home to more than 7,000 501c3 nonprofit organizations that address an astounding array of needs. They steward our natural and cultural resources. They help us care for people of all ages. They educate us and enrich our lives. And the typical nonprofit in New Hampshire is small. 71% have revenues under $100,000. At the same time, they're a powerful economic source in our state. But the last time that figures were available, 15% of the state's workforce is employed by a nonprofit. As we've all gone through the COVID-19 pandemic, many people have really begin to recognize how important nonprofits are to our communities. And here in New Hampshire, our state government relies on nonprofits to deliver a lot of critical essential services, everything from providing healthcare, housing the homeless, feeding the hungry, supporting our elderly, providing childcare, and so much more falls to nonprofit organizations, where in many other states, these are government services. Today, nonprofits are helping address our most pressing needs, and they're doing so at a time with increased needs in the community, growing demand for their services, rising costs. And many of you may know that financing a nonprofit is a very complex issue. Nonprofits rely on a wide array of revenue sources, including some have grants and contracts with state and federal government. They rely on philanthropic support, investments, program fees, and more, other income as well. For many nonprofits, charitable gaming is an important part of the revenue mix. We're pleased to help the commission as you consider, I have one more thing, wait. This is a vulnerable time for the nonprofit sector. Like their for-profit counterparts, we're facing workforce challenges, wage pressures, rising expenses. But unlike for-profit companies, we can't simply raise our prices in order to support. We need to rely on this diverse mix of revenue source and contracts with government and philanthropy, which often don't cover the full costs of doing business as a nonprofit. We're pleased to work with the commission as you invite charities to come in so that you can hear from their experience about how charitable gaming supports them. We've begun reaching out to some of our members, and we would invite a group here that would represent the diversity of mission, the diversity of geography, working with different game operators, as well as the size of the organization, so you can understand how important it is to various revenue mixes. As this commission reviews potential changes to charitable gaming laws, I urge you to keep in mind that gaming exists in New Hampshire to support our charities. That is the regulational construct that was passed. And these charities, these very charities, are so important to our states and our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Let me ask the first question. So of your charities that you represent, what percent would you say are adverse to charitable gaming in terms of just because it's gambling? Or do they all embrace, would like to see charitable gaming enhanced even more?
I don't have data about what charities' positions are. I think you can see that a number of charities have seen that revenue is an important part of their mix. Certainly every charity would, have that conversation with their board about how that aligns with their mission.
Okay. So do you, in terms of knowledge about charitable gaming, is it safe to say that your memberships are well aware of charitable gaming, that it exists?
I think that a lot of charities are aware of that. There's more education. We had a forum last Friday in which we talked about charitable gaming, and a representative from the commission came as well and talked about it. So it is something that not every organization knows how to access, but there's broad awareness and increasing awareness of it as an option.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. Just in general, the 700 members of the New Hampshire Center, are we using the word nonprofit and charity synonymously? Is every nonprofit a charity?
So in terms of the 7,000 number, the 7,000 nonprofits are the five in the state of New Hampshire, are 501c3s based in New Hampshire, providing services in New Hampshire. The center and our members includes nonprofits of various types of nonprofits. The bulk of them are charitable nonprofits. Is that your question? Does that address your question?
So it's not necessarily synonymous. A lot of nonprofits are charities, but not all nonprofits are charities.
Not all nonprofits are charities, but the vast majority are. But there are like 20 different subsectors of the charitable there's 501c3s and 6s and 19s and all of those. And this, I don't know all of the, this RSA, charitable gaming, is open to, I think, 6 different types. So it is primarily charitable, but like there's 5.
Yeah, that's your cheating.
Okay.
The one behind-
But like veterans groups are, are not.
Not all of us.
Are not all.
501Cs are
Correct.
eligible. I think it's a handful. And I get you the list, Representative Egan, if you want. Sorry, Mr.
Right.
Chairman.
No,
Get you the list. It's not all of them, but it's closely defined.
I think we should all see those.
Yeah, so we can
Look at it.
we can pull the RSA.
Okay. Yeah, Tim.
Actually, it's a question for Charlie, just because I want to make sure I'm clear on it. So again, there's no geographic correlation between a charity and a gaming operator. So someone from Berlin can be working with Nashua.
There's no required, there's almost a natural one though.
Right, obviously, the locals
Obviously,
are going
yeah.
to come in, but the operators can accept from anywhere in the state as long as they meet the 50C requirement.
Correct. Thank you.
Fred has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for taking my question. I'm just pretty unfamiliar with your organization. Is there a resource that I can use to see who the 700-plus members are? Where you folks started, how you started, that kind of thing? Do you have a
Yep.
website or something?
Yep, we have a website, nhnonprofits.org, and you can look at, we have our list of members is there, as well as information about all of our programs and services that I referenced.
Quick follow-up.
Yes,
Do you know offhand how many of your members are currently engaged with charitable gaming?
I don't have that exact number, no.
Rough guess?
How many charities are
At present
Operating.
involved with,
presently involved?
you
Yeah.
know,
Sorry.
There's a strong, I guess what I would say.
The minimum would be 104 per location.
no, I get that. My question was, she represents a group of charities or nonprofits, and I'm wondering how many of those are involved at present, to your knowledge, if you don't know. If we can find that out, I'd be interested. Thank you.
So my thought is that the commission have additional public input from charities at some point, maybe next meeting or the meeting after. And I'd like to get a cross-section of the charities. And I was going to ask Ms. Reardon to help us with that, to give us a cross-section of the types of facilities that are charities that are out there. Without objection, is that okay with everybody? So, okay. So, any other questions of?
Just for clarity, we have 2 members on the board here that, on the commission, that are representative of the charities. Are you saying a component, if I'm reading you right, Mr. Chair, a component from this group is going to, I want to hear from everybody.
Well, we can't hear from,
Well,
we can't hear from everybody.
well, there's
So,
800-plus charities that are actively involved. I think we should hear to the extent that we can, but you're not isolating our testimony to one group presenting.
Oh, no, the individual charities. But what I'm looking for is a cross-section of charities. We don't, I don't want to hear from every Boys and Girls Club, but one Boys and Girls Club or one, by type of organization. Huh? So,
Would
Yeah.
perhaps written testimony make sense if we had some charities maybe write some written testimony and everybody can kind of peruse over it at their pleasure?
yeah, I know.
Or-
I was in the legislature long enough to know that.
No, I know. But I would agree with Representative who said, I'm just questioning like how many
Nice to have
charities do we
written
want to
testimony,
have?
It's better to get people in front of us
Okay.
to talk.
How many do you have kind of in mind?
Well, if we each could go 5 minutes and we're given,
So open it up and give everybody 5?
well, about maybe 10 to 12 charities,
Okay,
something like that.
good to know. Thank you.
Well, I guess our charity representatives, I mean, we technically have the list of all the charities. But I just wanted to look for somebody who has maybe our two charity members can offer up some thoughts about as well, a cross-section of the kind of charities we want to hear from. Yeah, yeah.
Hello, Ms. Reardon. Can you give us an idea, maybe not today, but in the future, as to whether or not your membership looks at the current system as being advantageous to their missions? In other words, would they prefer a situation where there is mission-directed monies from charitable gaming versus just the luck of the night? So if one charity gets a Wednesday night versus one getting a Saturday, and I know very little about the statistics of this, but if that Wednesday night doesn't prove to be a great night for gaming for whatever reason, but Saturday nights are fantastic, in some cases that might be the luck of the draw. What I think we would like to hear a little bit about is the actual mission-focused aspect of those monies and whether or not your membership would prefer a system like that.
I think that's a good reason to bring some charities here to hear directly from them, and we can certainly work on that as well.
Because I think the point is that in statute, there's no direction as to, other than maximum of 10 days. There's no anything about make sure everybody gets a weekend or, and then you can say, well, we're leaving up the facilities. We are leaving it up, right now, we're leaving up facilities to pick which charities get which dates. And we all know there are good dates and there are bad dates. I think most of them work towards the ones that I talk to, trying to balance it out a little bit, that everybody gets, some weekday dates and some weekend dates, dates that are which have been more profitable for everybody, including the charities. So, but there's nothing in statute that directs that. I mean, it's just the way it works. Again, as a commission, is this something we want to delve into? I think we're gonna probably start delving into it a little bit. It may not be that there's anything different comes out the back end, but I think we need to have the conversation about that. And I think having the charity input would be very valuable to all of us on that. But like I said earlier, all charities aren't created equal. All charities don't put as much effort into their dates in terms of filling a room up with people, promoting their dates. Hey, we got these 10 dates, people who like Boys and Girls Club and wherever, come on out to whatever facility that's holding those dates and help us out that way. That's the way this was originally intended to work. That the charities would sponsor the date. When it used to be in the church basement and the guy with the roulette wheel came to the church basement, that charity was really promoting the date. So there's value in that, to me, that the charities are promoting the date because it's helping everybody out. It helps the state out too. So again, I'm just trying to go from where we were to where we are today, and as to what the philosophies are here, as we move forward, whether we think that we need to adjust our statutes accordingly, but that's to be seen.
Mr. Chair, as a charity to speak to the weekend comment, typically we get 7 days and it includes a Monday to Sunday just for licensing, posting, and those purposes. It makes sense to have them be in order. And then typically, if you do get up to 10, maybe one gets 2 weekends, maybe one gets 1. But I think everybody, for the most part, and the lottery could speak better to it with other rooms and experiences. But typically, everybody gets a weekend.
Charlie?
Yeah, certainly, if you looked at the reports that were sent 2 meetings ago or last meeting, you'll see the revenue generally reflects the days you got. And so they're all done by room, all that report, so you can see which sort of are even and which are not even. Pretty self-evident.
So again, I guess what I'm interested in hearing from charities about is, again, are there charities that had a difficulty? What was that difficulty? And is it a legislative solution or just a operational problem, right? So, I mean, I think, again, for the most part, the charities are faring well under charitable gaming, but the question is, what are we missing? Right? So there's people that had problems, wanted a date, couldn't get a date, people who feel like they were shortchanged in some way, shape, or form. Let's have those conversations and find out bring that to the light. And let's have that conversation, see if it's a statutory problem or a regulatory problem that this commission needs to look at. But I guess I'm struggling to see if we just have 10 or 12 charities show up and say, nope, things are great. What's the value to the committee?
Can I ask this question? Would it make sense for us to send out a questionnaire, sort of a Survey Monkey type thing? We have all the email addresses, I think, by and large. A series of questions to get back responses. That seems to be more of a broad-based sort of
That seems like a
research.
great starting point to get a summary of the, 800 charities that are out there and what their experience has been
Correct.
working with the operators.
I mean, there are certain folks that, just don't have email, I think, but yeah, by and large, I think we could do that pretty effectively.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. So Survey Monkey. Charlie, would you need some help with creating the questions? Would you want?
I don't think so. Certainly, we do this a lot for lots of things. So I think I can, Kelly, would you please remind me I promised to do this? Thank you. But certainly I'll send a draft before I send it out.
Okay, and so we can add right, we can
Yeah.
do that additional questions.
It's, the way you ask a question on research is incredibly important. So
Right,
it'll be very generic.
okay, well, this is good. This is good. All right, so I think we're gonna do this first, and then we'll look at maybe inviting some in as well.
Yeah.
It was a good point, Tim, that you brought it out. So, okay, great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for the director. We got this sheet with all the charity revenues on it. I was going to ask the question, what was the difference between a nonprofit and a charity? There's a lot of people on this sheet. I know there's a couple of social clubs, a football club, and they're collecting money mostly on bingo and lucky sevens. But would these people be eligible to apply for days at the casinos?
Yes, it is. And the revenue is based, if you look at across the grid, the ones that have HHR are the facilities that have HHR. So in some cases, that charity is not licensed at a facility that has historic horse racing. That's why it's limited to bingo and lucky seven.
Okay, and as a follow-up, I only asked because you said not all nonprofits are eligible.
Correct. So for example, a political action committee is technically a not-profit and it's not eligible.
Okay, but anybody on this sheet would be.
Correct. And it's delineated in the RSA by the section of the 501c that it falls under.
Okay.
501c3 being the most popular, but there's a number of them.
All right, thank you.
Tim,
Hey, Charlie, again, maybe to make it easy for everybody, you could kind of break out the 50Cs on a single page and say, here's an example of a 50CX. These are some of the charities that fall underneath it. Here's the rest of them that aren't allowed, and here's the type of things like the political action committee, right?
Yeah.
So maybe we have just a one-sheeter to understand which 50Cs are eligible and which ones aren't eligible. Would be great.
Can do that. Actually, Val, you can do that. Thank you.
all right. Well, that'll be helpful. So
Yeah.
we'll have that we'll look at that as well.
See why he's other commissions.
Before, yeah, right. So, okay. So anyway, and on the agenda, I said that we should start the conversation on the number and location of charitable gaming, but I think we've already kind of discussed that. And that'll be for another day, that we'll have a more in-depth discussion about that as well, as a commission. So let's talk about the next meeting. My sense is that not everybody wants, I mean, Christmas is coming up. And I know the first week of January is a tough one for the legislators in the room, because that's when you're both going to be in session dealing with all the retained bills. So I'm looking at maybe the second week of January, maybe that Monday. I'm trying to get that. So when is session, guys? Is that the 33rd?
We're not over there. We have a, look at.
So that first week is going to be, I know in the Senate, we're pushing
That's
all of our
right.
hearings as
Yeah.
fast as possible. So I think that second week,
Right.
again, on Mondays will be okay. Because we usually, we don't have a lot of committee activity on Mondays.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, did you say in the last meeting that the 10th would be an option of December?
Yeah,
I
we
got it in
could
my book that we're going to meet on the 10th at 10 o'clock.
December 10th
that would
is
be-
Sunday. December 10th is a Sunday.
No, it's a Monday.
January 10th.
Okay, good.
December 10th is a Sunday.
He's talking about this.
No, December.
I mean, if
Thought
we
we
would do
said
another
2
meeting
days.
this month,
Okay.
pipes, it'd be like the 18th, which would be, like the week before Christmas.
Into January.
Right,
Go to January.
I didn't think there'd be much objection to that. So,
We're to meet twice before.
well, here we go now. Now we're in crunch, we're gonna be, the next 6 months will be, or 5 months anyway. So I'm looking at January 8th, Monday, try to do these on Mondays. Most of the work is still in the middle of the week for, I know with COVID, it used to be in the House side, it was just Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. But now it's spread because they've doubled up the rooms, so they have to schedule them all 5 days for hearings. There won't be any session days after for a couple of weeks anyway, for probably a month. So the first week of January is out because there's plenty going on there with all the retained bills going to various floors. So January 8th, can we do January 8th? All right, at 10 o'clock, January 8th,
January 8th
Yeah.
at 10.
10. Now, I'm gonna talk to your assistant actually too, to see if we can get this room. Okay, so we're gonna try this room. If not this room, I have to talk to Aaron and we'll try to get one of the rooms across the street, just a little easier for you to. And then our plan C is always the lottery, but we'll try 10 o'clock on the 8th. All right. I think, is there any other business?
Recommendation that we also set a second date for the 22nd, just to get our calendars. At least in January, we'll have 2 meeting days.
Yep,
Then do the 8th and 22nd, for 2 Mondays.
yep, that works for me.
22nd and not December, it's the next day is the New Hampshire primary. So.
Well, why don't we do the 29th? Why don't we do the 29th? Yeah,
At 10.
10,
Okay, we'll try to get this room.
yes. Yeah, I'm gonna walk over one. All right, so, yes, John.
Did we approve the minutes and I missed it?
Oh, we didn't approve the minutes. Thank you. We got a motion to approve. Anybody seconding? Okay, Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, minutes from last meeting, aye, opposed?
I'm going to abstain.
Abstain, right? Okay, very good, minutes are approved.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Yep, thank you all.
A prosperous new year.